"Pack it up now, no permits, no exceptions," Mr. Whitman snapped like a gate with teeth as he jabbed. 911 on speaker. But when the cruiser rolled to the curb, an officer, Daniel Hayes, stepped out. His warning died in his throat because the offender at the lemonade stand was Zuri Johnson, the little engineer he greets at the crosswalk on Willow Creek Lane. The first real heat of summer sits heavy on Willow Creek Lane, turning the asphalt soft at the edges and sending a shimmer up from the cul-de-sac. Zuri Johnson tugs the twist tie on a plastic bag, shakes out a stack of paper cups, and lines them with a precision born from fourth-grade art class and a lifetime of wanting things to look just so. She is 11, long-legged and bright-eyed, a girl who names her plants and writes secret titles for every cloud that drifts above her window. On her wrist, a braided friendship bracelet, yellow, pink, white, chafes lightly each time she lifts the ladle. Her mother, Tasha, squints at a cardboard sign propped against the table. $5, she says, joking, and Zuri giggles. Beneath the bold lemonade, another line, fundraiser for camp. Tasha kneels to tape the corner and takes inventory. A glass dispenser full of lemon slices and ice, a shallow tin of coins, a small jar labeled tips with a heart. The stand is a small miracle of scavenged supplies and careful hope. Camp means robots and forest trails, a scholarship that covers most but not all, and Zuri has calculated the rest on a page full of careful math. Across the street, Mr. Whitman watches from behind his blinds, where he watches everything. His house is the sort that always looks like a listing photo. Lawn at regulation height, driveway scrubbed of dust, a flag that never tangles. His jaw works while he stares at the girl and her mother, at the drooping balloons tied to a chair, at the cluster of neighborhood kids who drift over with dollar bills clutched in fists. His hand closes around his phone in slow irritation, as if the device itself has committed a breach of decorum. "First customers," Tasha murmurs as two brothers approach, coins chiming. Zuri ladles the lemonade like a ritual, careful to give each cup a floating lemon wheel and 1 cube of ice, because too many cubes crush the taste and not enough turns it warm too soon. She's thinking about the counselor's email "Congrats, you're in," and how the word "congrats" felt like a balloon inflating right behind her heart. Mr. Whitman opens his door. The squeak of the hinge carries. He doesn't cross the street. He speaks from his front step, a voice pitched to travel. "You need a permit for that," he calls. Conversations stall. The brothers turn with their cups, startled. Zuri's ladle pauses mid-air, lemonade dripping back into the glass dispenser in sticky drops. Tasha smiles with the kind of politeness that lives on top of patience. "We're just neighbors, sir. It's a little stand for camp." "This is a quiet street," he replies, stepping down to the sidewalk. "There are rules. Sidewalk obstruction, sanitation. My wife has asthma sensitivity." He gestures toward their side yard, as if an invisible committee is seated there. His eyes flick to the jar labeled tips and back narrowing. Zuri can feel heat climb her neck. She tries to remember what her aunt says about breathing when adults are unreasonable. In through your nose, out through your mouth, shoulders relaxed. She thinks of a gear she built from cardboard last week and how it turned smoothly when she fitted the teeth just right. People are not gears, she reminds herself. They don't turn because you want them to. "Sir," Tasha says, still even, "we're on our own lawn. The kids are paying with quarters they found in couches. We'll pack up before dinner." "It's the principle," he says, and the word falls between them like a brick. "You can't just set up commerce wherever you feel like it. There's a process." A teenager on a bike coasts by and slows, thumb hovering over his phone camera. The air changes in that way Zuri has learned to fear. A subtle stiffening, a bend toward the possibility of trouble. It is a hard lesson, taught in 1,000-layered ways, caution, delivered as love. Tasha's smile thins. "Zuri," she murmurs without looking, "why don't you take a little break?" "I'll handle this." But Zuri doesn't move. Her hand tightens around the ladle, and in her chest something both small and stubborn says, "This is my stand." She thinks of the flyer taped to her wall, the one with pine trees and kids wearing lanyards, and the words "You belong here" written across the top. She thinks, I belong here too. Mr. Whitman lifts his phone to show he is serious. I'm calling, he says, and the dissonance of it, the idea that police could be a logical extension of lemonade strikes Zuri as both absurd and dangerous, like someone deciding to use a chainsaw to slice a cake. He turns away, already narrating. Yes, there's an unauthorized vendor on Willow Creek Lane. No, they don't have a permit. Yes, they're refusing to stop. Tasha exhales through her nose and puts a hand on Zuri's back. It feels like a shield, pressed gently between shoulder blades. We're fine, she whispers. We're right here. Whatever happens, I'm right here. The lemonade, the balloons, the neat stack of cups, all of it seems to tilt imperceptibly, the way a room tilts during an earthquake you can't see, only feel. Somewhere a dog barks. The teenager's camera is up now, red dot glowing. Zuri thinks of the officer who sometimes works the school crosswalk, the one who always says, "Afternoon, engineer," whenever she passes with her heavy backpack. She never knew whether he was teasing or telling a small truth about who she might be. Sirens don't scream anymore when they turn onto Willow Creek Lane. Policy changed after complaints. They whisper. The sound grows anyway, inexorable, cresting over the roofs like a wave that forgot how to stop. Zuri's bracelet tightens when she clenches her fist. She looks at her mother. She doesn't cry. A patrol car rolls into view and slows, the light bar idle, the windows holding nothing but sky. The car idles at the curb, the engine ticks. The driver's door opens, and an officer steps out into the heat with a hand raised in a soft, open greeting. He scans the scene, the glass dispenser sweating on the table, the jar with its hopeful heart, the man with the clenched phone, the girl with her shoulders held still like a pond in wind. He takes 2 steps, then stops, recognition settling over his face like light finding a familiar object. It's not the stand he recognizes. It's the child. Officer Daniel Hayes learned the discipline of noticing in his rookie year, when his training officer had said, "Most trouble announces itself, kid." It's the quiet that surprises you. He sees the quiet on Willow Creek Lane and reads it like a code, the way people's hands hang just above what they're doing, suspended, the way eyes fix longer than manners usually allow. A mother's fingertips at rest, but ready on her child's back. He is already taking off his sunglasses when memory snaps into place. The girl by the lemonade is the one from the crosswalk, the one with the purple backpack that looked comically large in October, and exactly right by May. He used to say, "Afternoon, engineer," and she would roll her eyes in a way that meant she liked it. He also remembers promising once last month, maybe that if she ever opened a stand, he'd buy the first cup. Officer discount? She'd asked, grinning, and he had laughed and said, "Full price, entrepreneur. That's how this works." "Afternoon," Hayes says now, voice low and unhurried, palms visible. The summer air presses against his uniform. Is everyone okay here? Mr. Whitman gets there first, stepping forward to intercept the narrative. "Officer, thank goodness. They're vending without a permit, blocking the sidewalk, attracting a crowd. I tried to explain, but they refused to comply." Tasha keeps her posture contained. "We're on our lawn," she says. "Neighbors stopped by. We can move the table back a foot if that helps." Hayes nods, cataloging details. The table is indeed on their grass. The sidewalk is clear. A small puddle of melted ice spreads in an innocent crescent under the glass dispenser. There's a single folding chair with a balloon tied to it. This is not a situation that requires authority so much as judgment, and he feels the weight of both settle on his shoulders. He looks at Zuri. "Hey," he says, "how's the engineering today?" For the first time since Mr. Whitman's door opened, Zuri's mouth moves toward a smile. "Balance and volume," she says before she can stop herself, and it comes out like a report in class. The ratio of lemon to sugar needs adjustment as ice melts. Hayes can't help it. He chuckles. "Copy that." He glances at Mr. Whitman. "Would you give me a minute to talk with them?" Understood, Hayes says, not agreeing. He turns slightly, angling his body to create a little pocket of space where Zuri and Tasha can breathe without the neighbor's eyes scraping at their skin. The teenager on the bike edges closer, camera steady. "Ma'am," Hayes says to Tasha, "I'm Daniel. May I ask a few questions?" "Of course," Tasha says, relief and caution braided so tightly together they're indistinguishable. "How long have you been out here?" "About 40 minutes. We're done at 5. "Any cars blocked? Noise? Trash?" "No, officer. We have a bag for cups. We can move the table back if you want." He nods again, the shape of the solution already forming. He can cite discretion. He can cite community policing. He can cite common sense. But there's something else tugging at him, a thread from a different direction. It's not only the crosswalk. It's a night 2 summers ago when his car's engine died 2 blocks from here, battery flat as a thunderhead. A man stopped a city EMT on his way home and pulled out jumper cables. And while they waited, an 11-year-old clambered from the back seat and asked if she could try the headlight switches. "That one makes it blink like a robot," she'd said, and he'd laughed even though he'd been bone-tired. He remembers the man's name only because it's stitched in small letters on a commendation in a precinct hallway. Johnson. "Zuri," Hayes says, testing the name. "You told me once you were going to camp this summer." Her eyes flick like a hummingbird's. Trust is a fragile thing, easily startled. "If we can pay the remainder," she says, "we're almost there." He nods toward the tin. It's a thin scatter of coins and a few bills, the day's small harvest. "How much is left?" $92, Zuri says, exact. $92.50. He looks at Mr. Whitman, who is hovering like a storm that can't find a place to drop rain. "Sir," Hayes says, careful, "I appreciate you calling when you think there's an issue. It's what we ask neighbors to do. In this case, though, I don't see a violation that requires shutdown. They're on their property. The sidewalk is clear. We can take a quick step back with the table, and I can note that we resolved it." Whitman's mouth tightens. "So anyone can sell anything on any lawn?" he demands. "What about when someone sells—" "I don't know, fireworks. What about safety? What about precedent?" "Precedent is that we use our heads," Hayes says. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He thinks of how many times he has been set to stop something that did not need stopping. How often the request for help is a request for hierarchy to remind someone of their place. He keeps his palms open. "If it helps, I can stand by a bit while they finish the hour." "Stand by?" Whitman repeats, as if the words are foreign. "Stand by a lemonade stand?" Hayes looks at Zuri again and sees more than a girl with a ladle. He sees a child who has been taught how quickly the world can turn. He sees a mother's controlled breath. He sees a door that could close or open, depending on what he does with his authority in this very minute. "I promised I'd buy the first cup," he says to Zuri, loud enough for the neighbors slowly gathering at the corners to hear. He takes out his wallet. "Looks like I'm late. Mind if I make it up to you?" Zuri swallows. Something in her posture loosens the slightest unspooling. "You can still be first," she says, because she wants to grant him that small forgiveness. She fills a cup, careful to include the lemon wheel and 1 cube of ice. She sets it down as if placing a fragile thing on an altar. He hands her a 10. "Keep the change," he says. "Call it a permit." A line forms with the ease of a story finding its next page. A woman with a stroller, a mail carrier on break, the teenager with the phone now tucking it away to count cash. Tasha murmurs thanks, gratitude threaded with a fear she doesn't dare relax quite yet. Mr. Whitman stands outside the flow, his face alive with a bewilderment that is not quite anger anymore, but not acceptance either. A man discovering that control is less reliable than he believed. A second patrol car noses around the corner, slow and curious, drawn by the call log pings that radiate outward from small conflicts. Hayes raises a hand, an easy gesture that says not an emergency, and the second car idles behind his. He takes a sip of lemonade, and it is too sweet, and it is perfect. He feels something settled that has been unsettled in him longer than he realized. "Officer Hayes?" A voice calls from the new car, window rolling down. It's Sergeant April Monroe, his supervisor, one eyebrow lifted as if to say, "What have you wandered into now?" He gestures her over. The crowd shifts. The heat presses. The moment extends, poised between resolution and rupture, waiting to see which way people will tilt when given the chance. Sergeant Monroe steps out, tugging her hat brim lower against the sun. She carries authority the way some people carry music, without thinking, without effort, something in her stride that makes space in front of her. She clocks the scene in 3 silent beats. Neighbor with a grievance, mother with control, child with steadied hands, officer with a cup already in his left hand and his right open, unconsciously, toward the people he's trying to keep safe. She draws close enough to speak quietly. "You good?" she asks, not just about paperwork. Hayes nods. "We're fine. Complaint about an unauthorized vendor. They're on their lawn. No obstruction. Thought I'd supervise the last hour." Monroe's mouth quirks toward a smile. "Bold deployment of resources," she says. Then, louder to Tasha and Zuri, "Afternoon. Sergeant Monroe, this looks excellent." She gestures at the sign. "My niece does robotics. Program changed her life." Zuri's eyes flicker. "Mine too," she says, and her voice catches on the last word because claiming a future out loud sometimes nags on past experience. She clears her throat and tries again, steady. "I hope mine will." Monroe turns to Mr. Whitman with the calm of someone who has navigated far worse tempests. "Sir," she says, "thank you for looking out for the block. Officer Hayes has assessed. We're going to let them continue." Whitman's posture falters like a flag when the wind shifts. He gapes. "You're ignoring municipal code for sentiment?" "We're applying judgment," Monroe replies. "If you'd like, we can talk about adjustments that make this easier for you today. We can move the table back, limit to 1 hour, keep the sidewalk open. After that, we all go on with our lives." He takes a breath that sounds like it might tear something on its way in. "This isn't personal," he says to no one in particular. "It's about standards. Every time people skirt rules, neighborhoods decay. Hayes thinks not every rule was made to keep people safe. Some were made to keep people out. He doesn't say it. He says, 'We hear you,' because hearing is a form of decency, even when you cannot grant the request that stands behind the words." The line for lemonade grows in small, neighborly increments. The mail carrier buys 2 and tucks them into the cup holders by her steering wheel. The teenager Andre, Hayes remembers, now buys 1 and then another, leaving a handful of coins that clatter and gleam. A little girl with hair beads that click softly asks for the one with the lemon that looks like a sun. Zuri works like the engineer she is becoming. Steady, precise, adjusting ratios as ice melts, lining cups in small rows that feel like progress. "Mom," Zuri whispers when the line pauses. "We might make it." Tasha glances at the tin, at the folded bills, the swelling of small change. She allows herself the curve of a smile. "We might," she says, and in that might is a universe reshuffling to make room for hope. Monroe steps aside to answer her radio. A quick update to dispatch that includes the phrase, "community engagement," and a laugh you can hear even through static. Hayes leans on the fender of his cruiser and sips slowly, letting the sugar sit on his tongue until it dissolves into something like a memory. He thinks of a man in an EMT jacket with Johnson stitched over the pocket. He thinks of being stuck on the side of the road and of the kindness that arrived without fanfare. He thinks that the golden thread running through all the worst and best days of this job is this: the choice, over and over, to show up with whatever will knit the world together instead of tear it. Mr. Whitman, unmoored, drifts a step closer. "Do you even care about my concerns?" he asks Hayes in a voice that has lost heat and gained bewilderment. "Am I just wrong here?" Hayes takes a breath. "I care," he says. I also think sometimes what we call order is just a habit of seeing some people as problems. She's a kid selling lemonade for camp. Whitman's shoulders slump. For a second he looks very tired. My father kept a store, he says, surprising himself by offering something true. He paid for permits, inspections, taxes. He said, if you cut corners, you cut your own footing. I hear his voice whenever people bend things. Hayes nods. I get that. He lets the quiet expand just enough to hold both men's ghosts, the father in the shop, the rookie on the roadside. Maybe today we can hold more than one thing at once. A blue SUV pulls to the curb. A woman in scrubs steps out, hair loosened from a shift, exhaustion shining on her like sweat. She stops when she sees Tasha. I'm sorry I'm late, she says, voice cracking. Traffic. She looks down at Zuri. How's business, baby? Grandma, Zuri beams. We're almost there. She points to the jar. $92.50 left well. Less now. Maybe. Grandma Johnson laughs the laugh of someone who has been holding a load so long she forgot how light might feel. She reaches into her pocket and produces a crumpled 20. For the Sun Lemon, she says, buying nothing and everything at once. She looks past Zuri to Hayes and does a small double take. We've met, she says. We have, Hayes says, on Maple 2 summers ago. You broke down, she says, and my son, he's out of state now, but he's never stopped telling that story. Her eyes soften. He said you were polite, Hayes swallows. It is such a small thing to be remembered for, and somehow it feels enormous. Monroe returns to the table with a handful of bills and lays them down as if she's making an offering. From my squad, she says. They asked me to bring the office some of whatever community tastes like. I told them it tastes like lemon and mercy. The jar rises past a threshold. Zuri counts and whispers, fingers tapping each bill like she's touching stars. We did it, she says, and then louder, triumphant and incredulous. We did it. The cheer that goes up is not loud the way sports cheers are loud. It's loud the way relief is loud, bubbling, messy. Right. The teenager who filmed the beginning swipes tears and says, I got the whole thing, and Tasha puts a hand over her mouth like she's holding in a cry and a laugh at once. Hayes feels the tremor in his knees that says something dangerous slid past without catching them this time. Then the tremor deepens. A horn blares not celebration, but frustration, and a pickup edges into the cul-de-sac too fast, brakes complaining. Doors slam. 2 men climb out in fluorescent vests, their impatience arriving before they do. Hey, one calls already angry. We got a complaint about cars blocking. Y'all need to move this circus. The moment teeters again like chalk lines in hopscotch, scuffed by a careless shoe. Monroe pivots. Hayes straightens, cup set down, spine lifted. Tasha's arm finds Zuri's shoulders. Mr. Whitman flinches as if the world has decided to punish him for being complicated. The summer air holds its breath. The men in vests are from a private tow service on contract for the HOA that manages the streets just beyond the cul-de-sac territory lines that never mattered until the day they do. They approach fast, clipboards like weapons. Hayes raises his hand again. Open, the gesture that can either disarm or be ignored. Gentlemen, Monroe says, her voice carrying even when it is soft. Officer on scene. We'll handle it. We've got orders. The first man snaps, eyes sliding past uniforms to the table, to Zuri resting there like a challenge. Cars are over time, fire laying down by the corner, and we got a complaint about business operations. Monroe doesn't move. Orders can wait 2 minutes, she says. There's no fire lane here, she points, calm, precise. And we're resolving the rest. The second man notices Hayes for the first time. You with her? He asks, jerking his chin at Zuri. The implication sits there like a match head. I'm with this block, Hayes says. Which includes her. Something in the first man's face shifts. Maybe he expected an argument he could win by getting louder. He looks at the neighbor cluster, at the phones up again, at the sergeant whose stance says she will not be rolled by urgency, whether real or invented. And then a new voice rides up the street, one Hayes hasn't heard in 2 years, but knows the way you know your own laugh. "Danny," it calls, incredulous and delighted all at once. "Is that you?" Hayes turns, heart beating a rhythm that has nothing to do with threat and everything to do with time. A tall man in a navy T-shirt and cargo shorts strides toward him from the corner house, a boy of 6 tethered to him by a small hand. The man's left shoulder bears a faint scar Hayes remembers from that roadside night. His right pocket carries a set of keys and a small flashlight. Johnson, his mind supplies, and then louder, crashing into the present. Marcus Johnson, met. Good laugh. Showed up when nobody had to. "Marcus," Hayes says, grinning in spite of himself. Marcus pulls him into a hug that swallows the awkwardness of uniform and heat. When he steps back, he looks down at Zuri and explodes into a father's astonishment made new every few months. "Girl," he says, "did you just fund a future out here with sugar water?" Zuri laughs for real this time, the sound unfurling like a banner. "We did," she says, "with math." Marcus looks at Hayes, then at Monroe, then at the tow men. "Is there a problem?" he asks, and the question is polite in grammar, but not in muscle. He glances at Mr. Whitman, whose face is a storm drained of thunder. "Neighbor," Marcus says, neutral. "Good afternoon." Whitman nods, swallowed by the moment he helped make. "Good afternoon," he mutters, and he sounds like a man who wants to go inside and sit in a dark room with a fan and some silence. The tow men assess anew and decide their time is better spent elsewhere. "We'll circle back," one says, which is contract for "we're not winning this one." They retreat in a clatter of clipboards. Monroe releases a breath almost no one hears. "All right," she says. "We're back to lemonade. I recommend the Sun Lemon." Marcus digs into his pocket and places a 20 on the table. "For engineering," he says. He looks at Hayes. "You still driving that stubborn Crown Vic?" "Old habits," Hayes says. "Old debts, too," Marcus replies, his voice dipping toward a shared past. "You stopped for us the night the tornado sirens failed. Remember, you blocked traffic and let my rig through when the road went dark. I remember people who make it easier to do the right thing." Hayes feels heat behind his eyes that has nothing to do with the sun. He thinks of all the nights the job pressed him flat, and all the mornings he rose anyway. He thinks of a promise made to a child in a crosswalk about buying a first cup, and how small integrity sometimes looks until you hold it up to light. The jar is full enough now to require a rubber band and careful hands. Zuri counts again, and when she says, "We're over," it breaks something open in Tasha. She leans her forehead to her daughter's hair and laughs and cries at the same time, one arm looping around her like a seat belt in turbulence. Around them, neighbors clap, embarrassed at their own emotions, hiding tears behind sunglasses. Whitman steps closer, shoes scuffing the concrete, and his next words are the most dangerous kind, uncertain and true. "I was wrong," he says, and the sentence feels like a foreign instrument held for the first time. There are right ways to care about a place. This wasn't one. I'm sorry." Silence holds still enough to hear a wind chime half a block away. Tasha straightens. She studies him for a long moment, long enough to acknowledge risk, history, harm. Then she nods once. "Thank you," she says, which is not absolution so much as an invitation to begin. "You could help by grabbing the recycling bin. Cups go there." He blinks. Then he nods, relieved to be assigned a concrete task. He fetches the bin with the strange gratitude of a man given a new job after failing the old one. He holds it as Zuri drops in rinsed cups, and the clatter becomes a music that belongs to this block. Monroe checks her watch. "We're at 5, she says. "Close-up shop, folks. Leave the street a little kinder than you found it." Hayes picks up a roll of tape and helps Tasha peel the sign from the table. He thinks of writing the report later, resolved with community engagement and lemonade. He wonders if there's a box to tick for grace. As he folds the tape back on itself, he notices Zuri's bracelet, yellow, pink, white frayed at one edge. Looks like an engineering problem, he says, nodding at her wrist. I have paracord in the cruiser. Her face brightens. Can I see? Come on, he says, and they walk together toward the patrol car, past neighbors still talking in soft bursts, past Whitman holding a bin, past Marcus ruffling his son's hair, past Summer pressing down like a hand that, for once, is gentle. Evenings come slow on Willow Creek Lane. Heat bleeds from asphalt. Cicadas tune their instruments. Porch lights snap on one by one like constellations taught to small hands. In the Johnson kitchen, a stack of clean cups dries near the sink, and a glass jar sits beside the toaster, heavy with bills and the bright fanfare of folded notes, tiny contributions with big handwriting. Go build something cool. Robots rule. You got this. Zuri stacks them into a pile and seals them with a paperclick, like they're a secret agreement between her and the world. Tasha stirs pasta, stitches of steam threading her hairline. She watches her daughter the way people watch waves, a little awed at the force contained in a small, repeating thing. You were brave, she says softly, and you were smart. Zuri shrugs, embarrassed and proud. You were brave, she says. You didn't yell. I wanted to, Tasha admits. Sometimes the most radical thing I can do is breathe. On the table, Hayes's paracord bracelet black, knotted rests by Zuri's fork, a gift tied around her wrist and then retied when she insisted she wanted to learn the knot herself. He'd showed her in the shade of the cruiser's open door, patient, saying, over, under, through, until her fingers found the rhythm. It is a small thing and a big one, both at once. The doorbell rings. Tasha wipes her hands and opens the door to find Mr. Whitman on the porch, hat in hand, like an apology from an old book. He looks smaller without his certainty. He holds a Tupperware container the size of a shoebox. My wife makes lemon bars, he says. She wanted to bring some over. She's been unwell, and I've been tight. That's not your fault. I'm sorry for bringing it to your door. Tasha studies him again the way you study weather, not to judge it but to know what to plan for. Thank you, she says, and she means it. Would you like to meet my mother? She was out when this happened. He nods and steps into a home that smells like lemon and noodles and a day that bent without breaking. Grandma Johnson comes from the den, cardigan pulled close. Whitman dips his head, grief bleeding through the seams of a man trained for neatness. My father kept a shop, he says again, like a story that changes each time it's told because the teller does. He died holding a ledger. I confuse rules with love sometimes. I'm trying to sort it out. Grandma Johnson smiles the tired, generous smile of someone who has seen better and worse. My husband, she says, was a rules man too. Then he met our daughter. That'll change a person. She takes the Tupperware. Tell your wife the lemon bars are beautiful. We'll bring the container back. On the porch, Whitman pauses. I watched her pour, he says, nodding toward Zuri beyond the doorway. It was so careful. It looked like church. Tasha laughs, surprised. It is a kind of prayer, she says. Thank you for seeing it. He nods again and retreats into a night less sure of its lines. Later, when dishes are stacked and the jar tucked into the drawer reserved for papers too important to lose, Hayes sits at his kitchen table under a tired ceiling fan and writes his report. He tries to keep it clean and spare and ends up with a paragraph longer than policy requires. He writes about a complaint, a curb, a stand, a community that chose to line up instead of square off. He stops before the part where he writes about recognition because there is no box for that, and no way to do it without sounding like a poet in a place that prefers bullet points. He settles for facts and hopes the truth hums anyway, just beneath the sentences. His phone buzzes, a message from Monroe. Good work today. Reminded me why the badge can be worth the wait. He types back, you too, then deletes it and types, thanks. He deletes that too and sends a thumbs up, the universal shorthand for feelings men like him sometimes struggle to say without irony. He sighs and laughs at himself in the same breath. Across town, Andre edits his video. He slices out faces of kids, keeps wide shots, adds captions that say things like community greater than complaints and lemonade law, be kind. He is careful and a little proud. He uploads. The view count starts slow, as they always do. It will not stay slow for long. At bedtime, Zuri lies awake, twin sheets tangled in her knees. She thinks not of the moment the patrol car turned the corner, but of the way the neighborhood moved after that, like iron filings finding their pattern around a magnet she didn't know existed. She thinks of Mr. Whitman's apology, and how hard it must have been to carry it across the street. She thinks of knots and ratios, and the way heat can be a cruelty or a comfort, depending on whether you have shade. She thinks of camp, of the smell of pine, of robots with friendly eyes that will obey her code like good dogs. "Mom?" she whispers into the dark. Do you think he'll really come? Officer Hayes? He said he'd come to demo day." "I think he will," Tasha says. "He seems like a promise keeper." Zuri lets that be a lullaby. She drifts on the small tide of a day that could have broken her and didn't. She dreams of lemonade turning into light. Weeks later, on a Saturday that tastes like September, the community center gym fills with tables and cardboard poster boards, and kids vibrating at a frequency only children can withstand. Zuri stands by her team's project, an obstacle-avoiding rover named Mabel, after Grandma Johnson's stubborn old hatchback with a remote in her hand and sweat at her hairline. Tasha straightens the sign. Grandma arranges lemon bars on a plate like an inside joke turned into tradition. "Engineer," a voice says, and Zuri turns to see Hayes in civilian clothes, a T-shirt and a grin. Marcus appears from the crowd with his son, then Andre with the camera, then unexpected and somehow right Mr. Whitman and his wife, the latter's asthma inhaler visible in the pocket of a light jacket. They form a small semicircle like a new constellation, like a story that remembered to circle back and check on its people. Zuri takes a breath, not because she is scared, but because control is a habit now, a good one. "Mabel," she says to the crowd, her voice clear, uses ultrasonic sensors to map her path. She avoids obstacles and seeks light. We taught her that. You can teach machines to do that. She flicks a switch. Mabel hums to life, wheels whispering. The little rover hesitates, scans, turns smoothly away from a chair leg, then heads toward a patch of sun gilding the gym floor. When she stops in the light, the crowd laughs and claps, and someone wipes their eyes because it is ridiculous to cry over a robot, and completely reasonable too. Hayes feels something rise in him that he can't name without reaching for words that make him self-conscious. He settles for clapping. He leans toward Tasha. "I'm proud of her," he says, and it feels like a claim he's allowed to make because pride in children is a common resource, not a private property. Tasha nods, the motion small and oceanic. "Me too," she says. "Every day." After, when plates are empty and batteries low, Zuri hands Hayes a cup from a dispenser near the bleachers. Lemonade, of course. He tastes it and flinches too tart, and then grins. "You adjusted the ratio," he says. "Engineering," she replies, shrugging one shoulder. "You make it better each time." He lifts the cup as if toasting the air. To better each time. Outside, the sky slips toward evening. The block will be there tomorrow, with its blinds and its shadows, and its neighbors figuring out how to be neighbors. There will be more calls that could go either way, and more officers who will have to decide which way to lean. There will be days when the badge feels like a burden and days when it feels like a key. There will be sugar and sun and heat and hands, sometimes open, sometimes fists. And there will be a girl who knows how to find light, who can teach a machine to do the same, who will remember the day the world tried to make her small and failed, because a few people stood exactly where they needed to stand and did not move.